you a woman in medicine feeling overwhelmed and disconnected from the personal fulfillment that you desire? You're in the right place. Join Doctors Joanne and Aaron as they rewrite the rules for women in medicine. Let's begin.
In this episode, we're going to be talking with Dr. Joanne Sotelo, my amazing co-host on Create Meaning in Medicine, about some of the obstacles that can get in our way. And as women in medicine, I think we don't always think of obstacles because we're so good at overcoming them. And yet, if we can raise some awareness about what they might look like and maybe some unique ways of addressing them, I think we might help you get through your day, get through your week, your month, your career even better. And I can't wait to unpack this topic of obstacles with you, Joanne. And I love how you set things up with frameworks. And I'm wondering if you can help us define obstacles that women in medicine might face and also some frameworks for thinking about them.
Thank you, Erin. This is an important topic. It always comes up. And I've had it in mind because I am creating content for the group coaching that I'm doing right now. And we set the ground with clarity, setting goals. We get excited. We think about our future. And then we build some momentum. We've been talking about momentum in this podcast. And then things happened. And we frequently jump into our negative thinking of, oh, this is too hard. I don't have time, or just work gets in the way. And it's like you said, it's important to have that awareness and maybe even the distinction that we have intrinsic obstacles that could be more of that mindset and beliefs, and then more of the extrinsic obstacles, which could be things that are a little bit more black and white or even systemic cultural. So I can give you some examples. So extrinsic are easier usually to identify. For example, if you're a mom with young children, or that, when I remember when the kids were taking karate and lacrosse and soccer, and then you just become a glorified taxi driver, Uber driver. So those are real kind of extrinsic obstacles because it's a season of your life that you're busy with other things. And then that can affect your work-life integration. That can create some struggles. Those are external as well, maybe needing a little bit more of that support. There could even be a gender bias at work. We've talked about that and how it affects your leadership, your mentorship, and even systemic barriers. What's going on politically, what's going on in the institution you're working, what's going on within your family. So those are things that are a little bit more black and white that might feel in the moment you have less control of. And then there's the intrinsic obstacles, which is great because we can identify, we can have more awareness. And this is where we come in as coaches and we can be helpful. But what you're learning in this podcast can be very beneficial as well. So you can listen to some of the examples. The first one that we talk so much about, perfectionism. Imagine that getting in our way. We are very successful. We move forward. We work hard. We are the opposite of lazy. But then sometimes our good intentions to do things very well and do it all can get in the way. Something that I hear a lot is imposter syndrome, that you wouldn't think that as women in medicine, we're so accomplished and usually smart and confident, but it gets in our way when we start doubting our abilities, even when we have evidence of success. So that's a big one that I hear a lot about. And then other things like fear of failure, right? Like it might be a little conflicting because we want to achieve, but then we're concerned of, are we gonna be good enough? Are we gonna be successful? How is it gonna affect the people around us? This is a huge one. Guilt. We can do a whole episode just on guilt in terms of balancing our family, our career, and our personal needs. And then we've also talked a lot about burnout. So those are a lot of examples, and we can probably keep on going of these intrinsic obstacles, which are, again, so important to recognize, because sometimes reframing how we approach them, we can acknowledge the part that's real, but then also think of how are we thinking about it? How are we feeling about it? What are the actions that we're taking from there? And then hopefully create some shifts even around the things that are more extrinsic that we cannot control.
Joanne, that is so powerful. And there are so many of these topics that you bring up that we don't talk about regularly in medicine, that we might even feel guilt and shame over. You're talking about perfectionism, how your good intentions might get in your way, fear of failure and imposter syndrome. Those just are not common topics. And I love that you're bringing those out today, because if we don't have awareness that those areas might be getting in our way and creating obstacles, and that maybe there's something you can do about it, it's going to make it more difficult for you to increase your success, or you're going to make it more difficult for yourself. And I would love to hear more from you, Joanne, about more specifics about how these obstacles specifically affect women in medicine.
I have so many examples that come to mind just this week in talking with one of the women who I am coaching, and she is transitioning into a new role in her job as a physician, which takes a lot of extra effort, more time. She's had to have different training to go into it. And yet she's hesitating to ask for some compensation or to negotiate her salary. And we can talk about everything that gets in the way, like we just talked about, in terms of her fear of failure, not communicating well, the imposter syndrome, not feeling ready. And and a lot of times it's not just like, just go and ask for more money, right? Like that would be an easy answer. But it's worth digging in a little bit and then saying, what's getting in my way? Why am I hesitating? If we're thinking about a friend, we would be like, of course, go ask for more money. And we're not even going to get into the gender equality here and the differences of how men negotiate and how women negotiate. So that's one that comes up a lot. And the other thing that came to mind, I remember this was a long time ago, that I don't know, maybe my kids were a little bit younger, and I was offered to be a candidate for a pretty prestigious leadership position in my institution. And the first comment I had from someone near to me was, do you know that they have meetings at 7 a.m? How are you going to do that with young kids? And it was enough in the moment to stop me. And I wish I could go back and talk to that younger self and then say, not that it was an automatic, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyways, but at least to consider, if I really wanted to do this, how can I negotiate it? How can I even ask for more representation? A lot of times, this opens a little different kind of worms here for our conversation, but frequently, there are not enough role models and representation in this kind of leadership committees, whatever they are. So it's easy. It makes sense to schedule meetings at 7 a.m. before you start taking care of patients, because a lot of times they might not be the ones, and we're giving gender, but sometimes it's the other way around. But usually there's someone else taking care of the kids. So how do you negotiate that with someone else and within yourself to be able to do what you want? And just the fact that it's a conversation to have, that frequently we don't even go there. So that's another example that came to mind from my experience, but I've heard it multiple times. And the guilt and the imposter syndrome, I'm sure there's a ton of that involved in my decision to then just say, not now.
And I want to point out here, Joanne, because it is so relevant. I was just coaching somebody yesterday on that thought of, what does no mean? Or you come up with a soft obstacle, like there's meetings at 7 a.m. Do you have the ability? Does it have to be black and white? And I remember there was a very important opportunity that I had about speaking. And I was told no by my boss at the time because we had just lost a physician, and it was during the busiest month of the year for our very busy nonprofit. And I worked with my coach. And I was like, I do not want to miss this opportunity. It's very important to me. And so I was so grateful that I'd been working with a coach. And there's a specific influence strategy model that I use for my clients all the time. I used it. And that initial no, I turned to a yes. And that in that model, we make it a win-win. So I was able to make it a win for me, being able to do this opportunity. And it turned into a huge win, both from my public speaking that grew out of that opportunity, but also then I was able to reflect that back on the job that I was doing at the time. And had I accepted that first no, and had I not had my coach there to help coach me, not just on asking again, but asking with a framework that had been proven to work and made it not just a win for me, but a win for them, that opportunity was hugely pivotal in my life. And I think that there would have been much different outcome had I not had the power of a coach who was helping me figure out ways to better maneuver through my life. So I don't want to minimize that. And I know that you and I do the same thing for our clients, helping them maneuver through more complicated circumstances so they don't have to take that first obstacle as a fixed barrier, and they can look for other opportunities to get around that.
Yeah, I think that that's a good phrase to use. Is this fixed, or is it something that we can reframe? That's a really good one.
And again, to reinforce that power of the coach, if you're trying to figure it out, how can I get around this obstacle? And it's just you figuring it out. Even if it's not a coach, maybe it's a therapist, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's a colleague. We isolate, and my encouragement, just like we talk about all the time, is finding somebody to bounce ideas off of. Two brains are almost always better than one. And if you're finding an obstacle, we'll get to that more of that later, I'm sure. But just so inspiring to hear that it doesn't have to be that way, where you have to take that no for an answer. Are there other examples of obstacles that women in medicine have faced, or maybe an example of one that you've helped someone get over, Joanne, with your own coaching clients?
One of the biggest ones that I've helped, actually several clients, but I'm thinking of one in particular, was I am not a good mother and I'm not a good enough doctor. And I'll raise my hand with that one. Erin, and you've shared too of how that's been a struggle. So I bring it up because it's a huge struggle for so many of us. And we're thinking about those of us who have kids, but it can also be even with pets, other family members, your romantic relationships, your friends, anyone who is important to you in your life, and feeling that guilt because we're so programmed as physicians to work, patients come first, and then the people around you and your well-being. So there's a ton of guilt. And it's also having the acknowledgement that we're not perfect, right? Going back to that. And that whatever it is that we're defining as 100% good doctor and 100% good mom, let's start there. Who's defining those roles? And how do you want to define what being a good doctor means and what being a good mother means? And that was a process we went through with a lot of iteration and digging, because it keeps on coming back, because guilt is one of those strong emotions that it's wired in our brains, and even while we're growing up. And she's in a really good point right now where she recognizes these are the efforts that I'm putting in to protect that time, set the boundaries, have present with my kids. And this is how I'm showing up in my office from this time to that time. I'm not bringing work home. I'm being very present, very engaged. So then at the end of the day, I can close and then be present at home. So it warms my heart to think of her, because it's taken some time, but I can see the difference. And it's also hopeful for the rest of us in thinking, it doesn't have to be an either or. We can find that balance and that harmony so that we recognize when the guilt comes, because it will come, and then say, no, there's nothing that I need to feel guilty about. How can I show up in the way I want to show up?
And that to me is so powerful, because you helped a woman physician, I'm assuming in the same role, in the same marriage, in the same family, go from thinking, I'm not good enough, neither in my doctoring role or in my parenting role, and helped her see, even in those same roles, you are good enough. And she didn't have to go looking for a different position, looking for a different family, right? You can find different outcomes with the right support. And that to me is so powerful, because I see how much when we don't have that support and we can't find those different answers within ourselves, or we don't have a coach or a therapist or someone to help us see that, then oftentimes we go looking somewhere else. I know I did that in my own life. I completely shifted my career looking for different answers, but I didn't have the support I needed. I didn't have a coach. I didn't have the right habits. And so I got the same outcome. And that took a lot of time and energy, big shift for my family. And I wonder, could I have been successful in the prior role had I had the right resources? So I love that gift that you gave to that client, how powerful. And I'm inspired that with this podcast, hopefully you and I can also impact women in medicine at not having to search somewhere else, but finding some of that power within. And with that, I would wonder, from your perspective, Joanne, what are some of those specific things that we can do that are in our control to make some of those shifts and pivots in our lives when we have obstacles?
Yes. And I created a little acronym because, I love frameworks. It helps our brain remember better and put things in order. So a framework to break barriers and deal with obstacles that we face as women in medicine. So I use the word align. I love that word. It's like, I'm going to make this work. So the A is assess your vision. And again, we sound like a broken record because it's that overlap with the clarity and the awareness to know what you want, what success means to you. How do you want to show up in this season of your life? And you can make that mean whatever you want. It does not need to be a definition that someone else gave you. So going through that work is so important. The L is leverage key milestones. We don't give ourselves enough credit for the work that we've done. And then also it can help us with checkpoints, strategic checkpoints, to make sure that we are moving forward with our goals. And a lot of times we feel stuck, or we feel like there's an obstacle because we go from start to outcome and we don't always have a fair kind of checkpoints throughout the way. So that's a good one right there. That by itself can help us move forward. And then the I is what we've been talking about, identify barriers and breakthroughs. So you heard some examples. Which ones do you relate with? Ask yourself, what are some of those external barriers right now? Can I influence them? And what are some of the internal ones that I can start recognizing and reframing? The G is ground yourself in daily actions. We were talking recently about momentum. It is those daily actions that will help you move forward. And it does not need to be always the same or always big, but that will definitely help you break through barriers and deal with obstacles. And then one of our favorites, the N, nurture your support system. Are you asking for help? I had this conversation just this morning. A good friend offering help, and I was like, I don't even know what to ask for. And it's so sad. And I do feel proud of myself because I said, okay, let me think of all the things that I need to do. I'm going to say them out loud. And then we can figure out together how you can help me. And it worked out. But it seems like such a foreign concept, even though we talk about it all the time. So are you talking about it? Do you have the people important in your life aware of what you're doing? start there. So that's without going into further detail. That's my Align to Breakthrough Barriers framework.
Joanne, I love how you simplify and make it easier to remember these concepts. And I'm going to just do a summary here. You talked about obstacles and how some of them are external to us, the extrinsic ones, and some of them are internal. And those are the ones we have so much control over, although sometimes we need some help and support to overcome those internal obstacles. Number 2, you gave some powerful examples of how you have seen obstacles get in people's way, like your own way, but also how you've helped people overcome those obstacles through the power of support, community, and coaching. And you have also provided this framework where it's based on the word align, A, assess your vision, L, leverage your key leverage your key milestones. Can't read my own writing. And give yourself credit. Those little celebrations along the way, let's not forget those. I is for identifying your barriers and your breakthroughs. So again, that celebration piece. G, grounding yourself in daily actions, those habits that are going to keep your momentum going forward. And N is for nurturing your support system. And as you said, allowing that to give you the help that might benefit you. And that's so powerful. And I wonder, Joanne, is there one more piece of input you would like to share with our listener about this topic of obstacles?
Something that just came to mind, actually, hearing you reflect on what we were talking about is I know so many of our listeners and the people that you and I work with in coaching are leaders. And a lot of times the obstacles frequently that are more systemic and external has to do with the fact that there's not enough representation, enough leadership from other women, enough role models. So if you are in a position where you can speak up, where you can become a role model, where you can set the trend for someone else who is following you, who is watching you, it almost becomes a responsibility. So think about it in kind of double goodness, to make up a word here, of your benefit, but then also how it benefits those who might be too scared to speak up or who might not feel like they're ready. You're setting up the trend and you're setting the example.
I love that, Joanne. Thank you so much for those amazing pointers on getting through the obstacles that we face as women in medicine. And if you are looking for more support, more resources, you can always find us on our createmeaninginmedicine.com website. And we would love for you to also stay tuned to our next episode, which is coming right up.
Do you want exclusive resources and the opportunity to connect with us? Then visit createmeaninginmedicine.com now, where you'll dive deeper into how you can create meaning in medicine. And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Connect with us on the website and tune in to the next episode.